The night was ink spilled across the glittering expanse of Ethelberg City. A sudden autumn rain had descended, its cold threads drumming against the glass curtain walls of the skyscrapers, a fine, relentless sound. It was a frigid accompaniment to the city's sleepless glamour and its deep, abiding loneliness. At the apex of the Apex Global Corporation Tower, in the CEO's office, the view was of the city's most brilliant jewels. A sea of neon lights flowed into rivers of shimmering color, blurred and dreamlike through the rain-streaked glass. Inside, however, the light was sharp enough to sting. Isabella Rossi sat behind a massive mahogany desk, her focus absolute as she reviewed a risk assessment report for an overseas market acquisition. She wore a tailored white pantsuit that made her fair skin seem almost luminous. A cascade of raven black hair was pulled back in a severe, efficient bun, revealing a smooth forehead and the elegant line of her neck. Her features were as exquisite as a masterwork of art, but her almond-shaped eyes, which should have shone with life, were chilled with a frost that kept the world at a distance. She was a finely carved ice sculpture, beautiful but radiating a cold that warned everyone to keep away. Knock, knock, knock. A soft rap on the office door. Enter, Isabella said without looking up, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. Her chief secretary, Linda Wells, entered on careful heels, holding a freshly brewed cup of Blue Mountain coffee. Ms. Rossi, it's already 10 o'clock. You need to rest, Linda advised gently, placing the coffee on the corner of the desk. You can look at this report tomorrow. The final decision on the merger isn't for another 3 days. There's still time. Isabella finally lifted her eyes from the document. She rubbed the space between her brows, and the brief flash of fatigue that crossed her features gave her frozen face a fleeting touch of mortal warmth. I know. You can go home. She picked up the coffee and took a sip. The scalding liquid slid down her throat, but it did nothing to melt the frost in her expression. Linda opened her mouth to protest further, but seeing the unyielding look in Isabella's eyes, she sighed softly. All right, Ms. Rossi. Please try to get some rest. I'll have the security department increase their patrols on the top floor. With that, Linda bowed slightly and exited the office. As the door clicked shut, the entire floor fell into a profound silence, broken only by the whisper of Isabella's pen across paper and the soft, steady patter of the rain outside. She wasn't ignorant of her exhaustion. She simply didn't dare to stop. Apex Global, the corporate empire her father had built from nothing, was now facing a crisis of unprecedented scale. Scheming uncles and cousins within the family were circling like vultures, while external competitors were sharpening their knives. One wrong step, and everything would plunge into the abyss. As her father's sole heir, she had to operate like a precision instrument, without a moment's rest, just to hold onto her inheritance. Another half-hour passed before Isabella signed the last document. She let out a long breath, leaning back in her chair and closing her eyes. The moment her tightly wound nerves relaxed, a tidal wave of weariness washed over her, just as her consciousness began to drift. An almost imperceptible crackle of electricity snapped Isabella's eyes open. In that same instant, every light in the office died. The emergency system didn't even have time to kick in before the entire space was swallowed by a thick, oppressive darkness. The city lights outside became the only source of illumination, casting everything within the room into strange, distorted silhouettes. A power outage? No, that's not right. Apex Tower had 3 independent power supply systems. It was impossible for all of them to fail simultaneously. Isabella's heart plummeted. A powerful sense of danger seized her. She didn't scream or panic. Relying on her intimate knowledge of the office layout, she immediately ducked down, her movements silent, and retrieved a small, compact handgun from a hidden compartment beneath her desk. It was a gift from her father for emergencies. She never thought she'd actually have to use it. Holding her breath, she tilted her head, trying to catch any suspicious sound. The darkness was terrifyingly quiet. Even the sound of the rain outside seemed to have vanished. Click! A faint sound came from outside the office door. It was the sound of an electronic lock being forcibly bypassed. They're here. Isabella's body went rigid, her palms slick with a cold sweat as she gripped the gun. She knew the jackals lurking in the shadows had finally bared their fangs. Meanwhile, in the first-floor security monitoring room of Apex Tower, Security Captain Wayne Big Dog Donahue had his feet kicked up, chuckling stupidly at a Twitch streamer on his phone. He was completely oblivious to the fact that the dozen monitors behind him had all dissolved into static. In the corner, A young man in a security guard's uniform was leaning against the wall, his eyes lightly closed as if he were asleep. He had a tall, lean build and handsome features, but his brow was creased with a laziness and indifference that seemed out of place for his age, making him look perpetually bored. His name was Cole Walker, and he'd been a security guard at Apex Global for a month. "Hey, Walker, you asleep?" Wayne glanced over at him, his voice thick with annoyance. "If you're going to slack off, at least find a better spot. Get up there and do a patrol round. Start with the top floor. Ms. Rossi is still working late. If anything happens, it's all our asses." Cole slowly opened his eyes. They were as black as midnight, deep enough to swallow all light. For the briefest of moments, an indescribable, razor-sharp aura flashed within them before being quickly veiled by that same lazy indifference. "Got it, Captain," he replied in a languid drawl, pushing himself off the wall and ambling toward the door. Wayne scoffed, muttering under his breath, "Piece of work, that one. Useless layabout. If you weren't decent window dressing, I'd have fired you weeks ago." Cole paid no mind to the grumbling behind him. He stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. As the car ascended smoothly, the cold metal walls reflected his placid face. A month ago, he was Hades, a name that made the entire underworld tremble. The organization he founded, the Abyss, was the ultimate nightmare for every dark force on the planet. But now he was just an ordinary security guard, here to fulfill an absurd engagement contract left behind by the old man. His fiancée was the CEO of Apex Global, the woman known as the Ice Queen, Isabella Rossi. His plan had been to observe her quietly for a while, wait for the right moment to approach her, and in the process, pay back the debt his family owed hers. But it seemed someone was determined not to let him have a quiet life. The moment the monitors in the security room went dead, his long-dormant, beast-like intuition told him one thing. He could smell blood. It was faint but pure, the scent of a professional killer. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. The top-floor corridor was pitch black. The air was thick with a barely perceptible killing intent, and the faint, elegant scent of a woman's perfume. The corner of Cole's mouth curved into a nearly invisible smirk. Looks like his little fiancée was in trouble. He ignored the main hallway, instead turning into the adjacent fire escape. His steps were as light as a cat's, making not a single sound in the dead silence of the darkness. He could clearly hear 3 suppressed heartbeats outside the CEO's office. Steady, with long, controlled breaths. These were well-trained professionals. And inside the office, there was another heartbeat, slightly faster, but desperately trying to remain controlled. "Go," a low, metallic-tinged voice whispered outside the door. The next second, the office door swung open without a sound. 3 shadows slipped inside like wraiths. Their objective was clear, the indistinct figure behind the desk. Darkness was their greatest ally. They were unaware, however, that behind them, a far deeper darkness was silently descending. Just as one of the assassins raised a silenced pistol, aiming for where Isabella was hiding, he suddenly felt a chill on the back of his neck, as if he'd been targeted by something ice-cold. He whipped his head around but saw only empty darkness. "Who?" His partners heard his choked whisper and immediately spun around, alert. But it was too late. A shadow moved with a speed that defied human vision, streaking past them. The first assassin who had sensed the anomaly felt his throat tighten. With a sickening crunch, his neck, hardened by years of brutal training, was instantly snapped by a hand that felt like an iron vise. He couldn't even manage a scream before his body went limp and crumpled to the floor. "Contact!" The other 2 hissed, instantly redirecting their fire toward the direction the shadow had vanished. Thump! Thump! The silenced pistols made only 2 dull coughs. The bullets went wide, punching into the far wall. One of the remaining assassins saw a blur of motion. A hand appeared before him, as if from thin air, casually swatting his wrist. The bones in his hand twisted at an unnatural angle. A grunt of agony escaped his lips as his gun clattered to the floor. An instant later, an elbow struck his temple with brutal, unerring precision. His world went black. The final assassin was completely paralyzed by fear. What kind of monster was this? They were the Night Owls, an elite international hit squad that had never failed a mission. But in front of this man, they were like lambs to the slaughter. He abandoned all thought of attack, spinning on his heel to flee the hellish office. But he had barely turned when he felt a light tap on his shoulder. Every hair on his body stood on end. He turned his head with robotic stiffness and met a pair of eyes that seemed to burn unnaturally bright in the darkness. What kind of eyes were those? There was no anger, no killing intent. just a dead, bottomless calm. They were the eyes of a god looking down on a pathetic insect. "Good night." A voice, so calm it was almost gentle, whispered in his ear. Then a palm rested on the crown of his head. An irresistible, crushing force pulsed downward, extinguishing all signs of life within him. From a moment Cole made his move to the instant the three elite assassins were dead. No more than 5 seconds had passed. Silence returned. Click! The backup power finally kicked in. Soft emergency lights flickered on, banishing the darkness from the office. Behind the desk, Isabella slowly straightened up, the small gun still clenched tightly in her hand, her face a mask of shock. And then she saw a scene that would be burned into her memory for the rest of her life. 3 men in black lay silently on the floor, their status unknown. Standing among them was a man in a cheap security guard's uniform. It was the young guard she vaguely recognized, the one she saw in the lobby every morning, always looking half asleep and utterly unmotivated. He was currently, and very calmly, dusting off his uniform as if brushing away imaginary lint, as if he had just performed the most trivial of chores. He turned his head and looked at Isabella. For the first time, a flicker of life animated his lazy eyes. He grinned, showing a row of white teeth, his tone as casual as if he'd just dropped by for a visit. "Ms. Rossi, good evening. Mind the tripping hazards on the floor. Wouldn't want you to fall."